philosopher or philosophically minded, you probably know something about the history of Western philosophy, right? The history of philosophy from the pre-Socratics through Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, the Stoics, up through the early church fathers, even figures that cross over from pre-Christian to Christian philosophy, like Marcus Aurelius or the Neoplatonists, then on through the church fathers and through Augustine, and then on through maybe the Carolingian Renaissance and John Duns Scotus, Erugena, right? Sorry, I get those two mixed up. Erugena on through Anselm and Aquinas, the Middle Ages, then on through modern philosophy and Descartes, Hume, Kant, Leibniz, Spinoza, maybe Berkeley as well, and up through Kant, right? And so if you know something about the history of Western philosophy, you also know that ideas flow through that history, and truth is no different. So in this video series, I've been talking about truth in the history of Western philosophy. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about post-Kantian philosophy. So with the death of Kant in 1804, I believe, modernism had run its course. Maybe it's still lingering around in some philosophers' minds. Hume seems to be one that's particularly difficult to get rid of. But anyway, modernity has run its course by the time of Kant. The empiricist's emphasis on experience as the guide of human life reached its fulfillment in Humean skepticism. The rationalist emphasis on the internal workings of the intellect to reach for certainty led to fantastic castles in the air, that maybe Spinoza and Leibniz, or Descartes' failure to get a really good ontological argument going. But the major response to Kant's idealism was found in the great idealist thinkers in the 19th century. I always feel like this is the century where the world just fell apart. I could be wrong about that. It just seems like it to me. I always feel like there's very few sane people in the 19th century. But George MacDonald was one of a few, and maybe a few others later in the century. These thinkers simply bit the bullet of Kant's internalistic view of truth and extended it to include what idealists called the absolute. All of reality as appearance is ideal, and truth along with it. And the greatest of these thinkers was George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. He dies in 1831. So Hegel makes truth to be the whole of a movement of the ideal as it unfolds within the absolute and not distinct from it. Now, if that made sense, God bless you. I'm not sure I understand. And I wrote it. I wrote this chapter on the short history of truth in my book, Theories of Truth and Introduction. But on Hegel's view, truth is the whole of what is real. And the whole of what is real is the absolute. This is kind of very strong idealism and a strong monism. And this reaches its completeness through a process of its own development, according to Hegel. Truth is not, quote, as Hegel says, like a stamped coin. It's not a stamped coin ready to be put to use. Truth has to become something unfolding in an ideal reality and not something fixed and external to our minds. It's this whole language of flow and of becoming, and it almost sounds like Heraclitus redux here. Heraclitus on steroids. Write it out, Heraclitus. All right. So Hegel collapses here the distinction between individual minds and external reality that can be truly known, right? So medieval philosophy especially, but the ancients as well, thought that truth was a relation between mind and intellect. But now for Hegel, these two are now one. The world that was fixed and distinct from a knowing subject who could come to experience the truth about the world has now been changed into an ideal unity of knowing subject and knowing object. The sober Aristotelian axiom that truth is a saying of what is that it is, and the realistic Thomistic notion of adequatio res et intellectus, the adequation of thing and intellect, is now replaced in Hegel and in the 19th century idealists with an inebriated idealistic notion of truth that is, quote, this is quoting Hegel here, bacchanalian revel, where not a member is sober. Truth is a big frat party. I don't know why I find that so funny. Hegel's great. Okay. Truth becomes something moving along with the unfolding of absolute ideal reality. Hegel states, quote, truth moves itself by its very nature. but the method just mentioned is a form of knowledge external to its material. So I treat idealism elsewhere in the book that I'm presenting here from in this video. It's really connected with coherence. Coherence and idealism, or coherentism about truth and idealism, go together. They're one of a same. Okay. Now, look, there were, of course, exceptions to idealism in the 19th century. One such example was Bernard Bolzano. He died in 1848. He maintained a fairly clear view of truth as correspondence, echoing Aristotle. Bolzano maintained, with Aristotle, the following. He says, I shall mean by truth, in itself, any proposition which states something as it is. So I'm like, wow, okay. there was some sanity here. Another example is a more theological rather than philosophical vein was the Scottish novelist George MacDonald. In his unspoken sermon on the truth, MacDonald argues that while truth is a correspondence of mind to reality, it is much more than that. He claims that truth is intimately connected with God, echoing Jesus' divine claim to be the truth. So, again, MacDonald's not really a philosopher as such, but he does have some really good insights. There's also some connections, I think, some nice connections, maybe ways of avoiding some of the problems with pragmatism. So I think there's a lot of affinities between MacDonald's view of truth, which I take to be a realist view, and the American pragmatism. But it's a different topic for a different video. So there's a great deal more to the history of truth that is presented in this chapter, in this presentation here. I've only touched on a few highlights in the history of philosophy, which do two things. I've tried to present a consistent line of thinking about truth as common sense correspondence, which is present in ancient literature, developed in the Greco-Roman Christian tradition, and flows into modernity. Now, there have been challenges with it along the way, even in the ancient period, like Protagoras, or maybe in the modern period with Vico. Some people don't agree with that, but Nietzsche as well in the postmodern period. However, the dominant view of truth in the history of philosophy has been some form of correspondence theory. Now, this doesn't entail that means that some version of the correspondence theory is correct, right? People can be mistaken for long periods of time. It does, however, give you pause to remember that many far greater minds than mine and yours, after reflecting about truth, have come to advocate some form of the correspondence view. Okay, so you can think of this video series here on the history of truth in Western philosophy as the basis, maybe a premise in an argument for the correspondence theory of truth. However, beginning with Kant and through the 19th century idealism, this strong line of thinking about truth as correspondence has been majorly challenged. Hegelian idealistic notions of truth as being identical with reality and the knowing subject has played a good part in what has been called coherence theories of truth. And maybe I'll do some videos where I dig a little deeper into that. But, truth has been up through, I would say, even say up through the 21st century, been the dominant form of truth in the history of Western philosophy. Again, there have been exceptions, and things go really wobbly once you get to Hegel. There's a long story of this from the medieval period through modernity and up through postmodernism. But the correspondence view has had a strong track record, and that again doesn't prove that it's true, but it should give you pause to think that maybe there's something to it, that we can know what truth is, and we can apply it to our lives to live life well. Thanks for watching.
Stay psyched, Grom.